Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. And in this particular video, I actually want to talk about how do you actually forecast revenue for a new product. And I want you to stay with me. This is a little bit different than probably what you would have thought it was going to be. So I'm actually a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I study a fair bit about learning and decision making that happens within new product development. It's kind of a really interesting area. And I was reading up some recent work that's all about behavioral decision making. So if you didn't know that there is a whole research stream about how people should make decisions and sort of forecast revenue. So for example, they might sort of come up with this very rational model and they come up with an Excel spreadsheet of how to actually forecast what the revenue is going to be for a new product. Or maybe it is some sort of entrepreneurial venture that you have created and you're trying to come up with a revenue stream and trying to come up with, this is how much I'm going to make within the next year or two. So I was struck by something that I was reading within this literature because I created this reciprocity project. So the E is written with a 3. You could check it out, reciprocity.com. And really what it was supposed to be, it was like the sharing economy proofreading platform where you can go and you can get credits. And as long as you help out other people, the whole system, the fees would be free. But then if you wanted to get proofreading done quicker and easier and stuff, you'd sort of pay for it, right? So it incentivizes people to be nice to each other is essentially what I was trying to do. And I forecasted, I thought within a year or two, I'd be able to have at least, a couple hundred users, that there would be, regular active users of it and stuff like that would actually pay for itself. But I was wildly off. I kind of underestimated how difficult and how challenging it was going to be to get users, but you could see it's kind of growing. You could watch some of my older videos or recent videos where I was sort of detailing, what's going on with the analytics and stuff like that. You can look at them in the YouTube channel. But really what was happening and what's really funny is that I was falling prey to something that actually a Nobel Laureate fell prey to. And he wrote about this, so it was Daniel Kahneman. You can watch some of my other videos. I actually really like some of his work. Daniel Kahneman, there's a bunch of people within this area that have done a lot of really interesting, amazing stuff, basically stemming back from Herbert Simon, who is a really smart, he actually won the Nobel Prize years ago too, but he was a really smart person that sort of investigated decision-making that happens in administrative organizations. So businesses and, things like that, right? Like how does decision-making actually happen? Jim March was one of his students as well. An amazing person, a really, really smart person in this particular area. But Daniel Kahneman came in the 70s, roughly around the 70s. It was Amos Tversky, and they started thinking about, well, how are people actually making decisions? And so they have this, he has this paper, Daniel Kahneman, and it's actually one of his students, Lovallo, and it's in management science. You could look at it, and to put a reference in the notes. But basically, the whole story. What was really so funny is he wrote this particular story how he was so off with predicting a new curriculum development that was going to happen in Israel. So he actually was really influential in Israel. Still is pretty influential in Israel. And they were looking at predicting decision-making within the school system in Israel. And they thought that this curriculum change would take, a couple of years, right? The whole story that he was writing out, was going to take a couple of years. There's a bunch of really smart people that were involved in this as well. And what he pointed out is that, if you take this inside view where you ask the committee of how long it actually takes, you're going to actually get a really underestimated prediction of what it's going to be. So he actually had a term for this. It was sort of the interview of decision making, where you ask people that have a very acute understanding of a particular project. They're going to underestimate how long it's actually going to take to get this particular project done. But then he asked the exact same people. He said, why don't you take a view of looking at comparable projects and how long they actually took to get this particular thing done, the curriculum sort of stuff done, and how long it would take, and he asked them just like, how long would that take? And it turned out that actually took at least 2 times as long. It took about 10 years, 7 to 10 years, I think is what their estimate was. And what he called this was the outside view, was just kind of taking this abstract view of you're just kind of doing a probability estimate. You just take yourself out of the picture and you calculate how long it's actually going to take by looking at sort of comparable projects. And when you do that, then you're going to have a less biased understanding of what's going to happen and how long it's actually going to take this particular project to get done, whatever you're working at. So I thought it was really funny because I felt, and he said that he fell prey to this exact same thing as well. So did I, right? I kind of thought that the reciprocity project would take a lot faster than what it did. But in general, it is growing, but it's growing pretty, which seems slow. It's actually growing at, I think, roughly about a 10% per month, which is pretty good, to be honest. It's actually phenomenal. But at the same time, to me, it seems like it's so slow. And there was another thing that came up that I thought was really funny recently when I was reading about this particular stuff, is that there is a phenomenon, and he came up with this sort of idea as well with Amos Tversky. It's anchoring and adjustment. And there was this paper by Epley and Gilovich that came out in 2006. And really what they were suggesting is that, to understand how anchoring and adjustment works, this is basically where you gather some information that you have, and then you base your estimates based on that available information that you have, right? So we all have information on how the world works. And then once you get this information, we sort of adjust relative, so we make some sort of prediction what the future is going to be, and we adjust relative to that particular anchor, right? So it might be that you have information about, so I have information right now about how long it actually should take to get a product onto market, right? So I read all this kind of stuff and I'm like, it's going to be really quick. It's going to make money right away. It's going to be profitable. And, and then we go from there. So basically what my anchoring adjustment was, I was reading all this literature in this area about product development and innovation, and most of it is sort of biased because it's based on Fortune 500 firms in terms of like how quickly innovation happens, how much profitability you might actually get. And I had this sort of idea that, okay, it's going to be the thing that I create, reciprocity.com, is going to be mildly profitable, right? So I had this anchoring of like, okay, for the most part, it might not do well, or it might do pretty well, right? So that's kind of what the literature says. So I had this view of this, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to adjust and just simply say, it's going to be mediocre, and it's going to take, it's going to be relatively quick to get there. So there was the anchoring, was having all this information about how innovation actually works or product development actually works. And the adjustment was me just kind of like calculating relative to me estimating what my ability is. I'm busy. I got all sorts of stuff going on in the background. I'm going to adjust relative to a Fortune 500 company. Turns out that prediction was probably off substantially. And what it was I wasn't putting enough sort of I wasn't thinking about it enough. So the reason why we make these adjustments, or how this adjustment actually works, and that's what the Gilovich and Epley paper was all about, was that we try to reduce we kind of do like what's called a satisficing sort of algorithm in our mind. We're like, okay, we can search forever by looking for, the most refined sort of estimate of what we think is going to be. But once we get to something that we think is sort of moderately okay, that we just estimate, we're just like, okay, this is good enough, right? And then we're going to go and we're going to sort of make a decision going forward, right? In terms of making a sort of forecast for new product development, is we're going to say, okay, this is what other people do. I'm going to estimate it going to be my own sort of new product that I'm introducing is going to be this good. And then, once it gets to the point where I'm like, okay, that's close enough, I'm going to stop from there. But what I should have done, and this is kind of the lessons from thinking about these two particular papers in terms of the anchoring adjustment sort of problem that we have. In fact, if I would have pushed it further and sort of developed it a little bit further, I probably would have had better information. However, wouldn't have had that information until I actually tried this particular thing, right? So it's a little bit, but what I should have done in terms of thinking about, okay, I have this anchoring adjustment bias, and I also have this, tendency to take this inner view. What I should have done is looked at the probability estimates of something that was much more similar to what I was doing. And the thing that is much more similar is a company or a firm that has very little resources. So it might actually be a blog. If I would have looked at the sort of the traction that blogs get, and I do that now, I would have had a much more realistic expectation of what's going to happen in the future, right? So if you actually look at blogs and the sort of traction that they get, I'm pretty inconsistent in terms of blog traction. It's really slow, and it just kind of bubbles along that way until, maybe it's 4 or 5 years in the future where you're actually getting significant enough traction. I would have recalibrated my estimates a little bit more, and I probably would have been a little bit okay with that. That's why I'm okay with actually pushing forward so long right now, is I kind of have this estimate in my mind, and it's actually a little bit more reliable. The other estimate that I should have done, and it's hard. I always have this tension, or managers in general have this tension between, okay, this is what I know and this is what I'm hoping to go to. But basically what I know is from any academic research project that I ever worked on, even ones that are quick, takes about 5 to 10 years by the time you actually sort of start this and you actually get some returns from this thing. So that is probably a more realistic sort of view of what's going to happen with this. So it's probably going to be 5 to 10 years, probably about 5 years from now, since I'm about 2 years in. So I started this, I think about 2014, when I first started thinking about the reciprocity project. And then once it actually came online was 2015, the end of 2015, and now it's been, 2015, 16, I don't know, it doesn't matter. But anyways, it's been significant and long enough that, maybe another 5 more years, I'm going to have pretty good traction that I can actually help out other people, that people are going to find this useful, that I can help out sort of other research scientists. They can use this platform to come up with some really cool insights that we couldn't have done before, would have very, very reliable science based on it. So that's my insights at this moment. So if you're doing anything like this, if you are sort of predicting forecasting revenue for a new product or some entrepreneurial venture, you want to be very careful about this anchoring and adjustment bias that we do have, as well, or these anchoring adjustment heuristic that we do use, and as well as this this tendency that we have to make decisions based on what we know rather than sort of looking at abstract statistical results. If you looked at the abstract statistical results, then you're probably going to have a much better estimate than if you kind of look at sort of what you're expecting based on your own internal knowledge. So it's kind of interesting, and that's going to help you forecast a lot better your revenue for new product development going forward. So that's it. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.